How did artists become so obsessed with the idea of optimizing themselves and optimizing their practice? I see it everywhere, especially on YouTube, and a lot of the art advice that gets put out there. It's like, here's how to perfectly structure your practice schedule. Don't do these 5 things. Here's the 10 hacks to get to this. Understand this better, all of that. Look, I know that the people who are putting stuff like that out mean well, right? And within their game, I suppose it's all fine, but I have to admit that down at the core, I disagree with that whole venture axiomatically. I just think that it is starting with the wrong questions and looking at the artistic practice the wrong way. And it really does, I'm mystified and I'm driven crazy by it. I really am. One of the things that triggered me into talking about this today is that I saw recently, even in my Discord, and I see this all the time in my Discord, but people asking questions that begin from this optimization viewpoint, right? Like, I think the one that recently had me thinking about it was someone said, like, how do I make myself draw all day? That may seem like an innocent enough question, but from my viewpoint, it's not innocent at all. There's actually a deep evil built into that question. That framing of how you are going to treat yourself and the practice and evaluate yourself is an absurdity, an irrational absurdity, as far as I'm concerned. And that viewpoint is an utterly modern one that is created by our goddamn benighted fucking culture that seems to do everything possible to make artists crazy and to crush them and to yank their little souls down into the dirt every day, every day, every day. Instead of just saying that, let me try to explain what I think is going on here. In this world that we live in, we have lost the ability to evaluate and give value to ourselves and our own work outside of the constraints of our culture. And unfortunately, and I'm going to use words here that are going to trigger a lot of people and a lot of their pre-built conceptions, right? But unfortunately, the main system that is presented to us is, do you and your work have an elevated value in the marketplace right now? The word that I'm worried about there is marketplace, right? You hear that and now you think I'm talking about capitalism and politics, and you want to explode into a discussion of left and right and are you a communist? I don't give a fuck about any of that. And I think that all of the positions are asinine and short-sighted and blind. That I do believe that is a core issue affecting artists. I am not saying that you then need to ascribe to some other controlling system that is supposedly better. No, that's for other people, right? Maybe that's for actual economic markets to switch from one thing to another. It is the place of the artist to hunt for freedom, for real freedom, wherever it can be found and how it can be found outside of strictures. So please ignore the current cultural loading around words like marketplace and capitalism or something like that. I promise you I'm not discussing this in the way that the goddamn news is discussing this. So we can feel it as artists. The people who are pained in their art practice, there's a core hurt that keeps coming up over and over and over again. And that is that they don't even know if they're allowed to enjoy what they're doing. They have been so crushed to dust by the world, so burnt out, so exhausted, so sapped of creative vitality that they feel delusionally that they can't feel good about what they're doing until something has come along to validate it. And the validation that people need is a perceived increase in the value of what they're doing in the marketplace. Now, there's many versions of the marketplace, right? For some people, that's going to look like the art is worth more money, or they get a job with their art that's a higher salary. Or for other people, it's going to be clout. It's going to be that they get a certain number of followers on some social media platform. Or even if it's less about a high number, it might be a different kind of clout, more like very high level artists in their perception follow them on these social media platforms, even if the number is lower, right? You can invent any kind of game of clout that you want. But I think it's undeniable that for most people, when these little pings, right, when these little achievements, when these successes pop up, this is when they feel best about what they're doing. And they spend the rest of the intervening time sort of commodifying their practice and their work, trying to get to these moments of validation. And in that process, they start demanding from themselves things like more regular output, higher quality work. The core thing that brought me here was the idea of like, how do I make myself draw all day? Where's that impulse coming from? Why do you think you need to draw all day? Well, it's almost always born from invidious comparisons to your peers, right? You look on social media, which is all lies, and the posts that your peers make on social media, which are all lies, and you think, oh, it looks like they draw 8 hours a day, and they have a higher value than me in this social media marketplace. So I got to try to get to the 8-hour thing, right? I got to try to get to that 8-hour milestone. You lied yourself all the way there. You deceived yourself to every one of those things. You don't even know why you want to match that. Let me give you, let me spoil it for you. Let me tell you the secret why you want to match that. You want to get the validation of feeling that you also fill that space of achievement, that space of I'm the kind of artist who works for 8 hours. The idea that an artist is better or worse because they're working for a certain number of hours is a modern product. And when you look at it that way, it's sure pretty nakedly obvious what the axiomatic assumptions under that one are, right? You're a productivity widget, right? You're a better artist if you're a better productivity widget. Your artwork is labor that you are commodifying, and the more of it that you make and the more attention that it gets and the more money that it makes is a higher market value, and you're a better contributor to this zombie art economy that we all inhabit now. And it is a zombie. It is currently a shambling, walking dead art economy of artists, these bohemian, inherently spiritual creatures, aspiring to nothing greater than to be well exploited by a multinational corporation, right? That's how low we have fallen. If you're one of my peers and you feel offended that by that statement, I'm glad I offended you. I hope that you will realize how small, miserable, and miserly that achievement and dream actually is in comparison of everything else that is possible and that might be out there. But honestly, that's small fry. As far as I'm concerned, there's a bigger problem than having your greatest aspiration be to be well exploited by a corporation for less than you're worth. The bigger problem is aspiring to be well exploited by yourself. Who told you that was a good idea? That is an absurdity only possible in our current culture. And our culture includes our economy and our system and all of that, but it's above that, contains them. Culture, the fact that it's created by our culture, to me means that we are all participatory in this. In this prison, we are the prisoners and the jailers in this one. we lock ourselves in this prison and we make sure that all of our brothers are imprisoned as well through our words and our actions, and especially in the things that we don't say. So the idea that it's worth your time to expend energy trying to learn how to optimally exploit yourself, right? Because that's what you're doing, right? When you're sitting there dissatisfied that you don't draw 8 hours a day, when for some reason you think you should, that's what you're trying to do. When you're in that mindset, you are your boss, you are your master, and you are dissatisfied with your own performance, the employee part of you that is going to manifest later. And you are trying to figure out how to incentivize your employee to toil better for your benefit. And when you fail to do it, then you're an angry boss who's considering firing the employee, right? And it really does get to that level for a lot of people who are trapped in this adversarial mindset, right? The moment of firing is the idea of quitting art or giving up, or I don't even know why I'm fucking doing this in the first place. It's like, of course, you don't know why you're doing it in the first place. You're not doing it for any reason when you're in that state. You are doing it just to try to increase your perceived value in the art marketplace. That's just raw. That's not art. That's not creativity. It's not creative to compete. It's not creative to look at what your peers are doing and just launch into raw competition and try to match them. That's not creative. It is what it's just matching. It's just jumping right into their race, right? And you deceive yourself into thinking that you're doing an inherently creative thing when you do that. No. Creativity is personal with a capital P. And true creativity is inherently singular, right? It occurs in events that cannot be defined. You cannot optimize 2 moments of creativity. There are no 10 fucking hacks for creativity, for actually having a creative, important moment of generative human capacity in this world. That requires a lucky and ecstatic embodiment of a lineage that nobody really understands. The same thing that had us painting the fucking animals on the walls of the cave, that same spirit is what moves us to do truly creative things today. And it is the same one that will move us to do truly creative things in the future. This cannot be optimized for. The only thing that can be optimized for is the inane, exhausting prioritization of blind productivity for no reason, for no discernible reason. But if there is one, it's only to benefit others, right? Again, going back to, my greatest aspiration is that some company will be able to well exploit me, right? And if I'm a fine artist, then my aspiration is to well exploit myself. I'm sorry. I know that you're working very hard. I know that you're working very hard doing your studies and bending over backwards to abuse yourself into the shape that you imagine you're supposed to be in. I know that you're working so fucking hard, but I hate to tell you, and maybe somebody needs to tell you, you missed the point. You missed the point. That's not what it was all about. That won't ever be what it's all about. If that's what you cling to, if that's what you're doing over and over again, you're going to burn out. You're going to destroy yourself, and you will destroy the practice. And anyone who has spent a considerable amount of time doing that will tell you. And they don't even need to tell you. You could just read their stories and their quitting in a huff posts on the internet. You could see some of the best artists alive today pouring their hearts out on Instagram stories or something like that, explaining why they can't goddamn do this anymore. Unfortunately, I think that for most people in the current era, because the world does not offer wholesome incentives, it is unfortunately more likely that a art career is going to burn you out than that a art career will give you sustainable joy for a considerable number of years. If I look at not the aspirants, not the beginners, not the novices, not the hopefuls, if I look at the professionals that I know, the people who have a career, including dream careers, if I look at that pool that I know, more are miserable than happy. More are immiserated by their practice than made joyful by their practice. And to me, that's not a mystery. It's not a mystery why. That there was no good incentives at a certain point. Maybe they started from a wholesome place, but then the world tweaked the knobs and pushed the sliders to make them the typical insane product of our times. And you get this sort of zombie professional artist where they have externalized the validation for so long in the practice, often to get to the point where they are, that once they've been a pro for several years, the ability to value themselves and value their art on their own has been lost. It's completely atrophied. Tell me if you know anyone like this, right? But they don't enjoy making the work anymore, but it's the most exploitable skill that they have. And so they feel locked into doing it for the rest of their lives. And they can only make artwork when they're on the job, because it is only when someone else tells them that this thing needs to be done that they can trust it. It's like, even if they feel cynical about it, that's the small iota of value that they can bring themselves to trust. An art director, a creative director, a company needs this done, and so it must be worth doing. And there, they can flog themselves to the drawing table. And when their mind turns to dreams of freedom and they see that, okay, well, if I just do a little bit more personal work, in my own time, I can sort of twist things around and make things better for me. Then when they sit and try to do the personal work, they can't bring themselves to do it because they have no longer the ability to internalize that evaluation, to say, I know this is worth making. They cannot take seriously that they know what is worth making. They can only take seriously that someone else, often their bosses or the companies, that they know what is worth making. Good luck. Good luck once you're in that situation. It can be fixed, but the fixing it is not about, tricking yourself into being at the drawing table. If what I just said rings true to you, it should be obvious that the solution to that is not Andrew Hubermaning yourself into being stuck at the drawing table because you took the right fucking nootropics or something like that. The problem is a spiritual problem, and the solution is a spiritual solution. The solution is finding a way to trust yourself again and being able to create your own values and to believe your own values, to know that you do indeed know what is worth making. That is to say, what is right and wrong, right? You need to trust yourself on that level. When you can do that, then you will be able to sit at the drawing table again without optimization, without any need for flogging, because you know that what you're doing is truly worth it. And isn't that what so many artists struggle with today? They have to, drawing challenge their way through their career because they can't just rely on the idea that making their work is worth it in and of itself, on its own, that it's enough that it comes from them. And of course they can't. Again, if we go all the way back, they can't trust that it's enough that it comes from them because they look at themselves and they say, I have a low value in the marketplace compared with my peers. I don't make enough money. How does my career stack up in cloudiness compared to others? You've just turned yourself into this miserable, again, this modern widget, right? And ironically, it may seem that the solution to that is to, be all right. I got to be more individual. I got to be more myself, right? It's like that. That's part of the trap too. That's what the trap is built on, right? Like compare yourself to everybody else. You could be just like them if you just did the same things. And wouldn't you know what the same things are? Take these drugs, do these exercises, do these optimizations. That is what the trap is built on. No, you break your chains in one moment, doing nothing. You don't work your way to it. You don't labor your way to it. You need a spiritual explosion that allows you to conflagrate these shackles in an instant. And that's a different discussion, the understanding that a little better. But I don't, this isn't the conversation about the conflagration, about that spiritual explosion. I just want to point out, I'm just saying that to make clear that the solution to this problem, like I said, is a spiritual one, because it's a spiritual problem. The solution is not to fall back into the illusion of optimization by looking at the problem and saying, all right, I need to, be more individual, be more secure and solid in myself. That is just perpetuating the egoic need to improve oneself. This is not an act of improvement. This is an act of release. Release is different from improvement. It is an act of dropping things. You don't drop things by gripping harder. You let go. You let go. All right. Let's go to an audience question. Today's question comes from Cody. And if you want to leave me a voicemail and ask a question about art or tell me an interesting art tidbit, I'll put a link to my SpeakPipe page in the description, and you can leave me a voicemail there. And if it's very interesting or just gives me good grounds to react to it, then maybe I'll answer it in a YouTube video. So let's go to Cody and hear what he has to say.
Hey, Steven. I had a few questions about lighting in paintings. One would be about inventing lighting, like they do in movies, where the lighting may not necessarily be realistic because they're doing whatever movie magic to get the shot that they want. I've got it in my head that there has to be a reason for everything, and it kind of trips me up while I'm working because it sort of puts me in a box constantly, and I have to keep reminding myself that I can just make it up. How much of it could you even make up before the image starts to look broken? Is it even worth thinking about as long as it looks somewhat correct? And the other question would be pertaining to like competing light sources. I've been running into that a lot recently as I try to do more and more complicated things, and it's just been kind of screwing with my brain, making it difficult to make decisions and stuff. Anyway, that's probably super vague, but that's it. Thanks.
Thanks for the question, Cody. Great question. When it comes to inventing lighting, you can justify just about any light choice in a painting if you get creative about it. Light can be bent and manipulated in all kinds of ways. Like you mentioned, movies do this excellently. And even outside of movies, just in nature, crazy stuff happens that is beyond human imagination. But the thing is that it is really not necessary to justify your lighting, to feel like you have to justify it, as if anyone was going to come asking, right? Lighting isn't good because it could theoretically be recreated on a movie set, or if it technically matches the lighting that you would find on June 18th on the summit of Mount Everest while facing south with stratocumulus clouds to the west and cumulonimbus clouds to the east. Those are guardrails that you can choose to put on yourself, It's a game that you can choose to play, and many artists have. But in the end, it's just a game. It's not an objective measure of what it means for lighting to be good. Ultimately, lighting is good if it's good, if it supports the themes of the picture and looks cool. And that's it, and that can be a hard pill for some people to swallow, but I've thought about it a lot, and it's the truth. As to how much you can make up before the image looks broken, well, in deft hands, you could get away with absolute murder. You could have not an inch of the lighting obey any rules and still have it look great. But you've got to be quite the talent to pull that off. And most people don't actually want to make it up everywhere. That kind of makes you crazy. It's much easier for basically everybody to have some pocket rules in hand so that you can move through the picture, making your decisions a little simpler. You could just say, okay, the left side of every form is lit and the right side of every form is shadowed. And then you just go form to form, and apply that rule. And that might get you through 90% of the work for a picture. Then, once you've done that kind of everywhere, you find the places where it's falling flat, and you make a decision like Frazetta did here on this Conan painting. Would the bounce light from that red cape ever be so strong to create that neon red secondary light on the right side of Conan? Of course not. But Frazetta knew how to get away with murder, and he knew cool beats everything. If you look at his collection of paintings through this lens, you'll find, a lot of delicious and wonderful lies in his oeuvre. On the idea of competing light sources, you usually don't want them to actually compete. Wherever multiple light sources meet, you want to decide, using your big art brain, which is the primary light source, which is the secondary, and possibly tertiary, quadtertiary, quintitiary, whatever. So always know the hierarchy of the lights in your head. Now, competing is one thing. The craft of making them overlap is another. But in case you don't already know it, I'll give you the cheat code to that. Lights don't interfere with each other. They just outshine each other. If you have one small and therefore sharp light source, you're probably aware that it will produce the modeling factors on a form. It'll create a form shadow, a form light, a specular, a halftone, and all the other modeling factors. If you then add another small, sharp light source to that same form, the modeling factors from the previous light don't just disappear. Those photons are still hitting or not hitting the form the same way. It's just that now there's more photons coming from another direction that might increase the brightness of the form shadow or make parts of that form light even brighter. And sometimes they may do this by so much that the effects of the first light source become very low contrast on their own and hard to detect. As an example, I was in the den downstairs earlier today looking at my dog. And the den is lit by a bunch of small, recessed lights in the ceiling, about 12 of them. If only one of them was on, it would cast stark lighting onto my dog with hard shadows. With all 12 on, the room generally feels evenly lit all over. But an artist will know that though it feels evenly lit all over, each of these lights must be creating the full spectrum of modeling factors in respect to their angle to the form, including cast shadows. And so I looked down around my dog, and there they were, 12 extremely low contrast, hard-edged cast shadows of her springing out from her like spokes on a wheel. They're low contrast because each cast shadow is lit by the other lights in the room, possibly by the whole group of 11 other lights. But you let your pupils dilate and look closely, you'll see them. Barely there, but there, and all hard edged. Where they overlap other cast shadows, that is to say, near my dog's fuzzy butt, they get darker and darker. And I know that the same thing is happening like on my dog's face and body with terminators and core shadows and halftones, right? It's technically on my dog, since there's 12 lights in the room, there's 12 terminators. But the added subtleties of organic forms make those nigh onto impossible to detect, because the turning of the form is already modulating all the values. And then on top of that, all of the values are being further modulated and evened out by the light from the other light sources, changing those values. So it gets very, very complicated, and they're very, very difficult to detect. The flat, simple floor makes it much easier to see those cast shadows and see the truth of how multiple light sources act together. Okay, so thanks for the question, Cody. I love musing about light. In summary, go ahead and make it up as much as you want. Just remember that most artists don't want to make it up all the time, because it makes painting so much easier to just plug in some rules as you go form to form. And then at the end, you pick a few key places where the rules give you a believable but boring result. And there you tell some exciting lies. So enjoy yourself while painting. Cheers, my friend. And same to the rest of you out there who are listening. I wish you much happy drawing, and I will see you soon. Take care.